Chapter 10. Beau, the Loyalty Test. Beau was halfway through his second coffee when his phone buzzed. He flicked his wrist, expecting some trivial reminder. Maybe a survey, maybe a task to pick up a free meal at one of the plaza's restaurants. Instead, his brows furrowed. Report to the Verosphere residential office. That was new. Tasks weren't usually this vague. He glanced at Dane across the table, who was still scrolling through Shelf Talk, chuckling at some debate about the best smoothie in the plaza. You ever been assigned a task at residential? Beau asked. Dane didn't even look up. Nope, Dane said quickly. That didn't help. Beau drummed his fingers on the table. There was no penalty for delay, but something about the wording, it wasn't a request. After a moment, he stood, stretched, and grabbed his jacket. Catch you later, Beau said. Dane waved him off absent-mindedly. Beau turned toward residential. His gut told him he wasn't going to like this. The Verosphere residential office was the kind of building people passed every day but never really looked at. Neutral-colored walls, clean, forgettable. Inside, the air smelled faintly of something metallic like freshly wiped surfaces and artificial lemon. A single desk, 2 chairs, a perfectly neat terminal screen, and standing beside it, Mrs. Everett. Beau wasn't expecting her. She was smiling, but there was something new in her expression. Something calculated. Mr. Wilder, right on time, Mrs. Everett said with a smile. Beau forced his usual smirk, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets. Well, I do love a good check-in, Beau said semi-sarcastically. She gestured toward the chair. Please, take a seat, Mrs. Everett stated. Beau hesitated. Mrs. Everett had always seemed friendly. Formal, sure, but never overbearing. Now, though, there was a weight to the way she was looking at him. He sat. She took the seat across from him and tapped something on the terminal, which made a soft chime. This won't take long, Mrs. Everett affirmed. Then the question started. The first question, displayed on his terminal and echoed by Mrs. Everett, was, how satisfied are you with your experience in Verosphere? Beau exhaled slowly, thinking that was a weirdly formal way to phrase it. I mean, I'm still here, aren't I? Mrs. Everett typed something. Then the next question, would you ever consider leaving Verosphere? Beau blinked. That was an even weirder question. Why would I? Beau stated. Just answer honestly, she replied. He hesitated. No, he said. Another few taps on the screen. Then the next question. Do you think everyone here belongs? The phrasing again made him very unsettled. I don't really have those kind of thoughts. More typing. Then Mrs. Everett folded her hands together, watching him closely. Has anyone spoken to you about things they shouldn't? Beau's pulse spiked. That wasn't a random question. That one was targeted. His mind raced. Evie, Gideon. Even just a few days ago, he would have laughed this off. Now, it felt like the wrong answer could get him killed. He forced a lazy grin. People talk about a lot of dumb stuff, like how the coffee should be stronger or how the beach should have better waves. That count? Mrs. Everett held his gaze. The silence stretched. Then, she smiled. That will be all, Mr. Wilder, she said. She stood. The meeting was over, just like that. Beau stayed seated for an extra beat. His heartbeat was too fast. He nodded, stood, and walked toward the door. But just as his hand reached for the handle, Mr. Wilder, she called out. He froze, turned back. Mrs. Everett's expression was still polite, but her gaze felt sharper. One more thing, she continued. She tapped her nails gently against the desk, voice smooth. Just out of personal curiosity, a pause. Then, do you believe that freedom exists without rules? She said plainly. Beau's mouth went dry. It was a simple question, but something about it felt loaded. Was this still part of the test? Or was she genuinely asking? He swallowed, forcing a grin. Well, that depends on who's making the rules, doesn't it? He said knowingly. Mrs. Everett's smile didn't falter. I see, she said, semi-disappointed. She nodded slightly. Thank you for your time, she said happily. Beau turned and walked out, his pulse hammering in his ears. As he stepped outside, the air felt different. Beau was halfway home when his phone vibrated. His stomach tightened. He pulled out his phone and glanced at the screen. A message from Mrs. Everett. Thank you again for your time today. If you ever have any thoughts on our conversation, feel free to reach out. Beau stopped walking. That wasn't normal. He had never received a follow-up, only directives and never invitations. But this wasn't an invitation. This was a reminder, a way of saying, we're still watching. Beau exhaled slowly, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Maybe he was overthinking this. Maybe. Or maybe they were already suspicious of him. Bo found Dane exactly where he'd left him, at the cafe scrolling through his feed. Dane glanced up as Bo sat down. You back already? What'd they want? Bo hesitated, trying to keep his voice casual. Just some weird questions, like, would you ever leave Verosphere? Dane's expression flickered. Not a big reaction, but a beat too long before answering. Huh, never heard of that before. Bo watched him closely. Yeah, and they asked me if anyone had been talking to me about stuff they shouldn't. Dane went still. For a split second, Bo saw it, the flicker of caution. Dane forced a laugh, shaking his head. Well, I look forward to my check-in. Bo didn't blink. You've never been called in? Not once? Bo questioned. Dane shrugged. Nope, Dane said flatly. Do you know anyone who has? Bo asked. Dane shook his head quickly. Too quickly. Dude, drop it. You get free food, good drinks, and no responsibilities. Who cares if they ask a couple of weird questions? I'm just saying, doesn't it seem a little... Bo said as he was cut off by Dane. Dane's voice lowered slightly. Don't ask questions like that, man. Bo's chest tightened. It wasn't a joke. Dane wasn't just blowing him off. Bo leaned back in his chair, looking around. For the first time, he noticed something. The plaza felt off, like people were watching themselves, like they had learned over time to keep their heads down. Maybe Bo had just never noticed before. Maybe he was starting to see things differently. Bo felt exhausted, so he decided to go over to his usual spot. He sat down with a drink in front of him. The sun hung bright over Verosphere, casting warm light over the plaza. The usual hum of life surrounded him. People chatting, shopping, moving from place to place. Everything was normal, but for some reason, it didn't feel right. Bo couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe it was the way people moved. Not hurried, not leisurely, just efficient. Maybe it was how no one hesitated. Every step, every action, like they had already decided what they were going to do before doing it. Or maybe they weren't deciding at all. A man near the fountain pulled up his MarketLink app, clicked a few things, and then turned on his heel, walking directly toward a shop. A woman standing near the bakery glanced at hers, then immediately left her conversation mid-sentence, stepping inside to buy something. Across the plaza, a different man barely looked up from his device as he moved to another bench, sitting exactly when the notification buzzed. Bo's brow furrowed. None of them hesitated. Not once. Not even a little. It wasn't like they were checking for messages or deciding what to do next. They were waiting for instructions, and as soon as they got them, they followed. Bo's fingers curled around his drink. This wasn't just people addicted to their phones. It wasn't that people were repeating the same things. It was that they weren't choosing anything. Their MarketLink app told them what to do, and they did it. Not with curiosity, not with excitement, just execution. A chill ran down his spine. Has it always been like this? Or was he just noticing now? He exhaled sharply, staring down at his own MarketLink app, and he wondered, what has it changed about him?